You ever wake up thinking it's just another boring Friday? And then by noon, you're tangled in a battle of wits with a scammer who's trying to steal $5,000 from you? Yeah, that was my Friday. And trust me, by the time it was over, he wished he had never dialed my number. My name's Arjun Patel. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Edison, New Jersey. I work in IT. Nothing glamorous, but enough to pay the bills, cover the rent, and maybe tuck away a little savings every month. That Friday morning started out normal. I brewed my coffee, made a quick omelet, and sat down at my desk to answer emails. Nothing unusual, just another quiet morning in my apartment. And then the phone rang. At first, I almost didn't pick it up. The caller ID just said unknown number. Normally, I ignore those. But something about that morning, maybe boredom, maybe curiosity, made me swipe and answer. And that decision, it flipped my entire day upside down. On the other end was a man with a thick accent who introduced himself as David from Microsoft Support. His tone was urgent, rehearsed, and just convincing enough that I could see how someone less tech-savvy might fall for it. He said, "Sir, we have detected suspicious activity on your computer. Hackers have been using your IP address to conduct illegal activities. If we don't resolve this right now, you could be held responsible." My stomach dropped. Not because I believed him, but because I knew exactly what this was. I'd seen these scams online before. This was the start of the classic tech support refund con. Most people would have hung up right there, but me, no. See, here's where I'm different. I've worked in cybersecurity long enough to know how these people operate. I've read the playbooks, watched the YouTube scam baiters, and even helped friends clean up their PCs after getting tricked by guys like this. And in that moment, I made a choice. Instead of hanging up, instead of ignoring him, I decided to play along, to bait him, to flip the script, because this guy didn't know it yet, but he had just dialed the worst possible target. The next 15 minutes were a performance. I let him walk me through the motions like I was his perfect victim. He asked me to open a run window on my computer. I pretended I'd never heard of that before, fumbling my words, making him think he was in control. Then he told me to download a program so he could connect and help me. A remote access tool. I knew what it was the second he said it. I exaggerated my hesitations, muttering, is this safe? I'm not sure I should be installing this." And he reassured me like a professional con artist. "Sir, please trust me. I am from Microsoft. This is very safe." Yeah, right. Once he had access to my computer, he ran through his little magic show. Fake error messages, flashing warnings, pretending to remove viruses. I let him play his part. But here's the thing. While he thought he was in control, I was already setting my own trap. I was screen recording everything. I had network monitors running in the background, capturing his IP address, logging every action he took. He thought I was his prey. What he didn't know was that I was already collecting the evidence that would one day bury him. And then came the turning point. He said, "Sir, because your system was compromised, we're going to issue you a refund for the protection plan you purchased." Of course, I'd never purchased a protection plan from Microsoft, but that wasn't the point. This was the setup for the refund scam. He walked me through opening my bank account online, or at least what he thought was my bank account. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't logging into my real account. I was logging into a decoy portal I'd created, a sandbox environment that looked identical to the real thing. The fake page showed balances, transaction histories, even little details like my supposed debit card number. To him, it looked flawless. And then, in his best "oops, I'm so sorry" voice, he accidentally refunded me $10,000 instead of $1,000. I almost laughed out loud at how predictable it was. He gasped dramatically, "Oh no, sir. Oh no, I have made a terrible mistake. My manager will fire me. Please, you must help me return the extra $5,000. I played dumb. I widened my eyes, muttered, "Oh my God, what do I do?" My hands shook as I typed, dragging out every second of his panic. On the outside, I was the perfect victim. On the inside, I was smiling. Because the account he was staring at, it wasn't real, and the keystrokes he thought were his victory. They were being logged, time-stamped, and saved in a folder I would later hand over to the FBI. That was the exact moment I knew this man wasn't going to walk away with my money. He was going to walk away destroyed. But here's where it gets really good. Because while he thought I was on my way to the bank to wire him $5,000, I was actually on my way somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that would end his little empire for good. He made a tiny mistake, the kind of mistake con artists use to turn normal people into desperate, panicked helpers. And because I played the role he expected, he dug his hole deeper and deeper until there was no way out. After he told me there'd been a refund, he walked me through what he wanted me to do. He used the classic line, "Sir, do not call your bank. We will handle this." He explained that the refund was temporary and that I needed to transfer the extra amount back using a secure method so his manager wouldn't be angry. Listen, con artists are actors. Their whole job is to create a tiny emergency and to convince you that they, and only they, can fix it. He kept repeating the same words over and over, softer each time, like a mantra that was supposed to calm me down. "Please, sir, we must return the funds now. This is very urgent." So I played my part. I started breathing faster, fumbled like I couldn't see the screen, acted like I didn't know how to click on a simple button. I asked stupid questions on purpose. Where do I click? Which number? I made small noises, little stammers to make him feel powerful. He began to patronize me, and that was perfect. He believed he'd found an easy target who'd be grateful for the rescue. He demanded a specific method: Western Union, MoneyGram, and sometimes gift cards. Different technicians have different preferences, but this guy insisted on a wire transfer because it was fast and effectively untraceable to a layperson. He told me to go to the bank cashier and send $5,000 right away. He even coached me through the forms I should pretend to fill out, so it looked sincere. Now, in any normal story, this is the moment the victim runs to the bank in a panic and gets scammed. But I was anything but normal. I told him I was on my way. I described every shaky step I could think of. Okay, I can't believe this is happening. I'm leaving now. I'll be right back." While he thought he had me running to the bank, I was doing 3 other things, quick, decisive moves that would later prove essential. First, I recorded his voice and the entire remote session, not just a crappy phone recording. I captured the audio, the remote commands he typed, and a running log of everything he did on my screen. I didn't record to get famous. I recorded because proof is what makes predators fall. Second, I started a private chat thread where I saved timestamps, his exact words, and all the details he revealed. The little throwaway phrases that con artists always use when they think they're not being watched. They slip up. They reveal phone numbers, names, manager titles, small excuses about internal systems. Those slip-ups are gold. Third, and most importantly, I started mapping the pattern. You don't need to be a coder to notice how a scam operates. I noted the cadence of his requests, the exact steps he pushed me through, and how he reacted when I hesitated. The more he got a reaction, the more he escalated. Once you see the rhythm, you can predict what he will do next, and that allowed me to set up the play that would trap him. He told me to do something else, a little theater to further panic me and ensure compliance. He asked me to open my email and watch for a message confirming the refund. He said the message would contain an authorization number and instructions to confirm the transfer back. When the fake email popped up on my screen, I let out a soft gasp and pretended to read it aloud. I read the fake authorization number for him, slow and trembling, like I'd never seen numbers in my life. He cheered, softly triumphant. Good, you are helping so much. Please return the money. It will only take a few minutes." Here's something people don't always realize. Confidence is contagious. When a scammer senses certainty, they double down. They believe they can move faster, and that's when they make their biggest mistakes. While he told me to walk to the bank, I didn't go. I stayed in my chair, and I continued the performance. I told him I was in line, that the line was long, that my hands were shaking so much I couldn't fill in the form. I fed him little lies to lengthen the interaction. I wanted him to be on the phone as long as possible. I wanted him to act, and then act again, and to reveal patterns. And reveal he did. At one point, frustrated, he barked, "Listen, my manager will fire me if you don't do it now. We have account XYZ 445993 that we use for returns. You must send the funds to that account now." He used the same lie most scammers do. The fictitious manager, who will fire them if they don't comply. It's meant to intimidate and make the prey feel responsible. Here is the first big reveal that would change the whole game. In his frustration, he slipped and said something about the back office having a different number. And he mentioned part of a routing code out loud, a short string of digits he didn't mean for me to keep. I typed it into my private log immediately. It didn't mean anything to me at first, but evidence is like a puzzle. You collect the pieces, and eventually the picture appears. Minutes later, he got cocky. He thought he was winning. He typed in information on his side, the fake transaction IDs, the so-called refund authorization codes, and I watched every keystroke. To him, these were meaningless details to fleece me. To me, they were breadcrumbs. By now, I'd also started texting friends in cybersecurity, not to ask for instructions, but to tell them the story, to let them know I might hand over the call log to authorities. One of them, a friend who works in an internet crimes task force, replied with a short message. "Save everything. Don't send money. We can use this." That message gave me the confidence to keep playing the part. And then he threw everything at me. "Sir, go to the bank. Send $5,000 to account 445993 at Eastern Transfers. Give them authorization code 77223. He rattled the code, and then, as if adding a flourish to his script, he said, "When you do this, call me back and tell me the confirmation." That confirmation line was the hook. He wanted it so he could move on to the next stage, the part where he would say, "We've confirmed the refund, thank you," and then take the traced funds. He wanted a human assurance, the emotional closure that con artists need to sleep at night. Now I want to be clear, I did not send him any money. Nothing. Not a single cent. I pretended to go through the motions. I pretended to be helpless. I pretended to be ashamed. I let him taste victory. And while he tasted that victory, I did something else behind the scenes. I set up a trail. I gathered screenshots of the fake authorization. I saved the exact wording of his demands, and I logged every second of the call. I didn't try to hack him. I didn't try to break into his systems. I simply collected the truth he offered me. At one point during the call, he laughed. A little, nervous, high-pitched laugh. And he said, "You are lucky, sir. Most people would have panicked. We would have taken everything. You are smart." I let him have that praise. He needed to feel clever. Then I dropped the act in a small way, just to see how he'd react. I asked a simple question out of curiosity. "How do you know my account has that much money?" He hesitated. That tiny pause was the second big reveal. He muttered that they get reports from spyware and remote tools that identify accounts with funds. In other words, what he thought was a mysterious algorithm was just someone eyeballing balances and picking targets. Every slip, every stray phrase, those were not just words. They were evidence. And then, right before he told me to wire the money, something unexpected happened. He got a call of his own. He answered it with an annoyed tone, and for a second I could hear a background voice speaking in rapid Indian English, and voices in a noisy room. He mouthed words at me when he hung up, a translate-like motion. In his brief distraction, He typed a string of numbers into my fake portal and muttered, "This one will be easy." That was the third reveal. They were a call center. They weren't lone wolves, they were a factory. A factory that churned out victims like mine by the dozen. That revelation tightened my jaw. These were organized people, and now I had not only their voice and script, but the ambient noise of their workspace. It meant I had a shot at connecting the dots, if the pieces lined up. The last seconds of that previous call ended with him asking me for the confirmation again, and me promising, trembling and ashamed, "Okay, I'm doing it now." I put the phone down. My hands weren't actually shaking. My heart was racing for a different reason. I sat back and breathed. I had him where I wanted him. I had evidence, a pattern, a call center soundbite, and an over-refund log. The trap wasn't sprung yet, but it was set. He thought he'd push me to the bank and I'd hand him $5,000. Instead, I was about to hand his whole racket to people who could close it for good. You ever watch a predator stalking its prey? Most people never see the actor behind the mask. But when you spend an hour on the phone with one of these scammers, you start to see the cues, the cadence of manipulation, the tiny verbal tics that reveal desperation. That night, I learned the soundtrack of a small criminal enterprise, and I used it against them. I sat down again and put my phone on speaker. The remote session was still open. His cursor pinged across the fake portal I'd set up. He sounded pleased, smug even, like someone who'd already enjoyed dinner paid for by someone else's panic. He kept asking for confirmation numbers, and I kept inventing new reasons why I couldn't get the bank to process them. A network error. I'm on hold. They say they need ID. Little fabrications to lengthen the call. The longer he stayed, the more he talked. The more he talked, the more he incriminated himself. Here's the truth most people don't get. Con artists are impatient when they smell fear. They rush. They overcompensate. That's where they slip. So I fed him fear, and I added a dash of incompetence. The perfect cocktail to make him talk. He started to pace through his script faster, his voice snapping between reassuring and threatening. He wanted his manager to be satisfied. He wanted the ritual of the victim admitting guilt and promising the wire transfer. That ritual is the currency of their confidence. At one point, he said something that stopped me cold. Out of nowhere, he muttered an internal note to himself, the kind a person makes when they think no one is listening. It was an address. Suite 4B, Rada Plaza, near Old Bus Stand. My ears perked up. I replayed the recording twice, then slowed it down. It was faint, almost drowned by background noise, but it was there. That was reveal 1, a location. A sliver of geography in a sea of deception. It wasn't a full breadcrumb, but it was a breadcrumb nonetheless. I typed it into my log. I took a screenshot. I saved the timestamp. These small details are what connects a faceless call center to a real place, and real places are where law enforcement can act. Next, he got cocky. He told me to confirm the refund by checking a fake reference number that he insisted would show up in my account history in a few minutes. I waited. When nothing appeared, he grew irritated. He shouted, not a loud shout, but the kind that comes off as practiced fury. We will lose our positions. This is a serious matter for my team. He tried to guilt me into rushing, to making the mistake that would let him collect. That's when I did something tougher than pretending to be scared. I purposefully asked a question that most victims never think to ask out loud. If this is all internal, why do you need me to do a wire? Can't you reverse it yourself? His response was instant and revealing. He said sometimes the back office cannot reverse without authorization from the customer. We need your confirmation for the ledger to match. He used words like ledger and authorization to sound official, But in the slip of his tone, I heard the mechanics of a manual process. People in the back clicking buttons and moving money around. This response also provided with a second reveal. This wasn't automated. It was manual labor. Humans at desks doing the moving. Humans you could locate. Humans you could bring to justice. By this point, I'd been in contact, discreetly, with a friend of mine, someone who's volunteered in cyber awareness programs and has friends in law enforcement. I sent him a chunk of the recording, the timestamps, and my private log. He replied, "Hold everything. Do not send money. We can escalate, but we'll need more. Can you get a callback number or any detail they used to verify?" I told him I was working on it. Then I baited the scammer into giving me a callback number. I did it clumsily, as if I didn't know what I was doing. They said they need to call me back to confirm. "Can you give me your direct line so they can ring me?" He hesitated, a small pause, then offered a number in a rush, a local-looking number with country code +91. He said, "Call this and say authorization complete, and they will finish the process." I copied it down. Now, here's a detail people underestimate. The soundscape of a call center is unique. There's always that low hum of multiple voices, the clack of keyboards, the intermittent laughter. You don't expect to hear it on a scam call, because we imagine scammers to be shadowy individuals, but they're far more industrial. That background noise, when captured on a recording, is a fingerprint. It tells you this isn't the lone wolf. It's a factory line of people whose shifts overlap, whose patterns you can map. I added the phone number to my log. I cross-checked the number's format and the faint network information I'd already captured. My network monitor had grabbed the source IP when their remote tool pinged my machine. It wasn't a direct address, but it was a beginning, a triangulation of where this call wanted to exist. I decided I needed one more thing to give to someone who could actually act. Evidence without context is a sad story. Evidence with context is a weapon. So I prepared a packet. The recording, screenshots of the fake portal, the routing digits he'd muttered, the callback number, and my notes of the conversation. I anonymized personal info and labeled each item with a timecode. I printed everything out. Walking out of my apartment that night felt strange. I had the phone tucked in my pocket like a live grenade. I rehearsed the words I'd say in my head. "I think I've been targeted by a tech support scam. I have recordings. I want to report it." Simple. But it took courage to actually say it to a government office. At the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center, the lobby was all muted conversation and fluorescent light. I sat with a cup of bad vending machine coffee and fidgeted. I thought about how many of the calls I'd seen online could have been shut down if just one person had done what I was about to do. I also thought about the people who had already gotten hurt. The elderly woman who lost her life savings. The single dad who wired his rent. The teenage kid who fell for a job offer scam. It felt heavier than my own stolen $5,000. When they called my name, a woman in plain clothes led me into a small room with a table and 2 chairs. She introduced herself as Agent Malik. She listened intently as I told the story from the beginning, and she didn't flinch when I played the recording. When it ended, she sat back and steepled her fingers, the way you do when you're calibrating the importance of a piece of information. "You did everything right by recording this," she said quietly. "We hear these things a lot, but we rarely get such a clean chain of evidence. The ambient noise, the callback number, the routing string, this could be something our team can use. We will open an initial inquiry." My chest loosened a fraction. That was more than I had hoped for. But then she added something that tightened my stomach again. "We'll need more. This is promising, but call centers are nimble. They rotate numbers, they use virtual private servers, and they target victims across time zones. If we move too slow or without more corroboration, they'll evaporate." That was the cliffhanger I didn't see coming. Justice had started its engine, but it needed fuel. More victims, more recordings, more leads. Agent Malik asked me a pointed question. Are there others? Could you get more examples? Could you connect us to anyone else targeted by the same group? I realized then that my role couldn't end at my own bank balance. If I wanted the operation shut down, I'd either need to find other victims or bait them long enough to collect more connective tissue. The problem was, baiting them further risked exposing me. The reward was the chance to take an entire factory offline. I left the FBI office with a promise that they'd investigate, and a warning that this would likely be a long road. I walked back to my car with a folder of paper and the echo of Agent Malik's last words hanging in my ears. If you keep them talking, we might locate them. But be careful. They notice patterns too. Back at my apartment, I sat down and opened the call log again. The phone felt heavier now, like an object that connected two worlds. My quiet life in Edison and a noisy call center half a world away. I could have stopped. I could have deleted everything, chalked it up to a narrow escape, and gone back to my life. Instead, I made a choice. I decided to keep playing, but more carefully. I would act as a single node in a larger net. If I could get them to reveal one more thing, a name, a phone, a schedule, that might be enough for Agent Malik to cross the final bridge. I hit record again and called the number back, heart pulling like a weight as the line connected. The caller answered within 3 rings. A bright, rehearsed voice said, "How may I help you today?" I breathed in, and in that breath, I promised myself 2 things. I'd get my money back, and I would make sure they could never do this to someone else the same way again. When I walked back into my apartment after the FBI meeting, the room looked different. The same couch, the same coffee table, the same stack of unpaid bills. But now I knew it was sitting on top of a line that reached halfway around the world. For the first time, the scam on my screen stopped being a clever nuisance and started feeling like a real criminal machine, one with people, shifts, and addresses. Agent Malik called me 2 days after our meeting. She started with the bureaucratic niceties. "We've reviewed the material you provided. Thank you for coming forward." And then she cut straight to the part that made my throat go dry. "We've opened an inquiry. We can't promise arrests yet, but you've given us a lead that's worth following." It felt like the beginning of something huge. But the agents were careful, almost clinical in how they spoke. It made sense. These operations are fragile. One misstep and everything scatters like ashes in the wind. She explained what they could do and what they couldn't. They could use my recording to corroborate other complaints. They could try to trace the callback number and the routing digits. They could coordinate with international partners, but only if we had more than a single thread, a pattern, a series of matches that tied different victims to the same operation. I told her I'd keep talking to them. I'd keep baiting. I would be careful. She warned me not to do anything that might jeopardize their lead. If they notice a pattern, she said, they'll shutter the numbers and shift servers. We'll lose the trail. So we made a plan that felt both bold and painfully procedural. I would continue the calls, keep him on the line, and try to get whatever additional identifiers I could. Names, phone numbers, any slip that would show the same fingerprints across different victims. They'd set their own systems to watch the callback number I'd collected and the routing code. They'd also open channels with foreign law enforcement contacts, who might be able to act on ground intelligence when the time came. There was a strange, surreal comfort in that. I went from being a frightened mark to becoming a node in a process bigger than myself. I was cooperating with federal agents. I was part of a plan that might actually stop people from being hurt. It felt righteous. It felt dangerous. I picked up the call again that evening. "Hello?" The same rehearsed voice said, like we were 2 actors continuing an old scene. "Hi," I answered, letting exhaustion soften my voice. "I'm so ashamed. I tried to follow your instructions. I went to the bank. There was a problem. They said they needed a supervisor. There was a pause, and in that silence I could hear a shuffle of papers, the low hum of a room full of voices, the tiny clack of a keyboard. It was the exact sound I had captured before, and it made my skin prickle. "Supervisor will call," he said finally. "Hold on. We will not be disconnected." He put me on a short hold, and then came back with a new urgency in his tone. "We must complete this now. Manager will be speaking to you directly. Please be ready to confirm." I felt the adrenaline spike in my chest. A manager, I realized, might be an even more vulnerable point of information. Managers use slightly different language. They slip more, and in their arrogance, they sometimes drop identifiers that their juniors know to hide. If I could record that manager, and if that manager used the same callback number or the same routing strings, then Agent Malik's team could stitch multiple victims' evidence together. I set my phone on the table and kept recording. The manager came on with a voice that was calmer, deeper, and layered with practiced authority. He asked for details in a way that felt rehearsed, yet oddly human. He asked where I'd sent the refund. I gave him the fake confirmation code I'd been trained to read. I kept my voice small, almost breathless. Then the manager made a mistake, not a huge one, but the type that mattered to investigators. While talking, he casually referenced shift change. He said, "We move some calls to the night team in Sector 7 when the day shift is off." It sounded like nobody had told him that phrase. That phrase, Sector 7, was a flag. It was human speak, a label you use when you coordinate an operation. It wasn't technical. It wasn't part of the script you read from a manual. It was a real cue used inside a room of people. I wrote it down, timestamped it, and my hands shook a little when I pressed save. I sent this new clip immediately to Agent Malik's secure channel. She called back within the hour and said, "This is good. Sector 7, keep that. Don't mention the FBI or our channel. Keep them talking. If you can get a location reference, anything like an address or a building name, we can query for it. This is how we make the dots clench." And so I kept playing the part. I let them believe I was a frightened man running on adrenaline. I fed them every minor mistake, every flub. I took the manager's voice, calm and dangerous, and let him think he had control. But the operation was not without its scares. One night, my phone rang from an unknown number, and the automated voice on the line told me I had a missed package. It was the kind of cold automation most of us delete without thinking about. I nearly ignored it. But then my mind went to worst-case scenarios. What if they had traced something and were probing? I called Agent Malik immediately. She told me those messages could be random, part of wide-targeted nuisance calls, but asked me to forward the number. They ran it. It came back as a spoofed line, which meant nothing by itself, but it also meant the people I was pursuing were not amateurs. They were sophisticated in their appearance. A week in, I had another break. One of the call center voices, someone who didn't sound like a manager or the regular technician, made a slip. He began telling a colleague on speaker, not about systems or accounts, but about food. "Do you remember the shop near Old Bus Stand? The tea there will go after midnight." The background voice laughed. It was casual, and it wasn't meant for me. But I had the audio. I looped that snippet and slowed it down and listened for any concrete words. Old Bus Stand matched the fate phrase I'd picked up earlier. Rada Plaza, near Old Bus Stand. That cross-check started to feel like a map. Now, in any sane person's life, these were just words. But to prosecutors and investigators, words that align become evidence. Two victims, two similar background references. Two time-stamped recordings. Those are the threads authorities use to request more action overseas. Agent Malik told me they were preparing to brief a partner agency. They wanted to know, though, if I could do one more risky thing. Get the scammer to admit on record where the back office physically moved money to. Not bank details, not step-by-step instructions, nothing that would facilitate wrongdoing, but a vague admission that the money was being pocketed in X city, or that their operation had an office near Y Market. Even a general admission could help an overseas team focus inquiries. If you're wondering whether I was terrified, yes, absolutely. The difference between reading a thrilling true crime story and living it is the part where your name is on the paper and a man with a headset knows your voice. I told Agent Malik I'd do it, but I also told her I wasn't going to go further than a confession of location and that I'd stop if anything felt unsafe. So I called. I set the scene carefully, played the trembling victim. I hinted at having a friend in Hoboken who could confirm transactions if they needed local corroboration. I tried to make myself sound small and easy to manipulate, and the manager fell for it. He became conversational, almost proud, as if boasting about how smoothly things worked when they had a system going. "You won't understand," he said at one point, as if revealing a secret to himself. "We move on the night. We collect on the weekdays when banks clear. Our office, near the old bus stand, behind Rada Plaza, Suite 4B. You don't know it, but the vans come after midnight." He laughed, a quick dry sound. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ear. I pressed record, saved the timestamp, and sent the clip to Malik. Her reply came almost immediately. "We're coordinating. Hold tight." She added in a voice I didn't expect. Soft, human. "Be careful. These people can be dangerous if they think they're expos." That warning reverberated in me. For the first time, the heroic narrative in my head split with the reality of risk. The manager and his laugh were not just voices. They were decisions being made by real people who could retaliate if cornered. I slept badly that night. 2 days after that, Agent Malik called with an update I'd been secretly, desperately hoping for. "We're getting traction. Our partners abroad have a location to check. We won't confirm anything publicly yet, but we're moving. Can you be available for a possible live call during our window?" Everything in me shouted yes, but Agent Malik's next sentence pulled me down to earth. "If this goes forward, we may ask you to stay ready to give testimony and to continue baiting until local officers are in position. You might have to keep talking while they move." In plot-heavy movies, this is where music swells and the protagonist strides into the sunlight. In real life, this is where you make a coffee and sit very still, waiting for the phone to ring, and every sound in your building makes you jump. 2 nights before the scheduled window, the phone rang at 2:17 a.m. I woke up to the buzz and fumbled for it. An unknown number. I answered sleepily, and a recorded message played, asking me to confirm an order. I didn't behave rationally. I called Agent Malik immediately. She told me again that spoofed or automated calls could be a nuisance, but we flagged it. She also told me, quietly, "If you spot any sign that your personal info is in the wild, anything with your address, your job, or photos, call us right away. Do not reply to any request for identification." The niggling worry never left. I kept thinking about the man who'd laughed about Rada Plaza. I tried to picture the room where he lounged on a plastic chair, the cheap stack of paper cups beside a kettle, hands tapping a keyboard, a supervisor's voice over his shoulder. I started to imagine faces. That humanization made it real and scary. Then, just when the air felt thick with everything ready to happen, I received a voicemail. A clipped, breathy voice said, "We know where you live. Stop messing with us." No name, no explanation, no accent I could place. The message was short and menacing. My first reaction was a rush of anger, so hot my fingers trembled. My second reaction was fear so cold it stuck in my throat. I forwarded the voicemail file to Agent Malik without comment. Her response was immediate. "We've received it. Do not respond to any contact. Lock down your accounts, change passwords, and consider staying with a friend until we move. We'll coordinate protective steps." There it was, the human cost. I was not a character in a story anymore. I was a target. The revenge I wanted now carried the weight of possible retaliation against me or my family. I slept None that night. At dawn, Agent Malik called back. "We still plan to move," she said, "but we're delaying by 24 hours to better synchronize with our partners. And I want you to know this. If you back out, it's okay. We can try other paths. But if you continue, we'll have teams watching everything we can watch." I told her I'd continue. I told her I would do whatever it took. The voice on the other end of the line was firm, and for the first time in days, I felt something like steady resolve. The operation was bigger than my fear. If catching them meant risking myself a little, then so be it. We agreed to a tight window in which I would call at a prearranged time while the task force coordinated a sweep. If they saw matching data, like my callback number being used in live traffic from the target office, they'd give the green light to local partners. The day before the planned action, the world conspired to feel both unbearably tense and maddeningly ordinary. My neighbor's dog barked. Trucks rumbled down the street. People went about their lives as if nothing hung in the balance of what might become a real raid across continents. At 10 p.m., the phone rang. It was Agent Malik. "Be ready. We might move in the morning. Get some sleep if you can." I wanted to sleep. I sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the ceiling. In the dark, the apartment felt like a stage, set awaiting a single light cue. My phone was on the coffee table, like a heartbeat monitor. I realized I'd been holding my breath for days. And then in the dark, I finally understood the scope of what I'd done. I hadn't just prevented one person from losing $5,000. I'd become a link in a sequence that might bring down a factory of fraud. That thought was both humbling and terrifying. Outside, somewhere near an old bus stand or a Radha Plaza, people with headsets were starting their shifts. Inside my apartment, I locked the door and tried to sleep, knowing that what happened next could change everything. When they broke the news to me, it was the kind of quiet that makes your skin feel too loud. The FBI called first thing in the morning and told me they were ready to move. I remember standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee gone cold, as if the steam itself had been arrested by gravity. This was it, the culmination of every long call, every clipped voicemail, every line I'd recorded into the night. Agent Malik's voice on the phone was steady but softer than the emails. "We have partners on the ground," she said. "We have a window. Stay available. Do not interact with anyone outside the call. Don't change your behavior. We may ask you to call again at a specific time to generate live traffic on the target numbers." She paused. "If we can capture live usage back to that office during the sweep, we'll have the probable cause we need." My hands tightened around the mug until the ceramic creaked. The call felt like a fuse being lit under a barrel. There was exhilaration, yes, but it was braided with the kind of fear that presses at your chest and whispers, "What if this goes wrong?" I was told to keep doing what I'd been doing, baiting, recording, staying on the line, but now with a greater purpose. They told me not to threaten them, not to mention the FBI on the call, and above all, to remain consistent. So I prepared mentally to play the frightened man for one more hour. When I dialed the number, the familiar voice answered fast as if it was relieved to hear me. "Hello? Sir, are you there? Are you ready?" I kept my voice the same small thing it had been. "I'm ready. They said they'd call. I'm terrified. Please make them hurry." He chuckled, the same small, triumphant sound. "Good. Manager will speak soon. Be calm." We waited. The manager came on. The same deeper voice I'd recorded before. He sounded bored, efficient. He asked for the fake confirmation codes and the phony bank details I'd been trained to recite. I repeated them like a puppet reading from a torn script. Halfway through the exchange, I heard a different tone behind the manager, a flurry of raised voices that sounded more urgent than before, snippets of words I couldn't catch. The phone hissed and then cut to a low, alarmed whisper. "Hold. Do not disconnect. They." And then, silence. The manager's voice returned, but it was clipped, not rehearsed. It was human for a second. "Sir," he said to me, And I'll never forget the raw edge in the sound. Please, we will handle this. You must not call the police. You must not tell anyone. Please. Something in me tightened. This was the moment I'd imagined in the dark. A real crack in the armor. I let it sink in. My voice betrayed nothing. Okay, I whispered. Just hurry, please. The line went quiet for a long time. Long enough for me to imagine their room. The fluorescent lights, the swivel chairs, the man with a half-eaten packet of instant noodles scanning a list of victims. Long enough for me to think of the people who'd been ripped off and never heard a sliver of closure. And then my phone buzzed. It wasn't the manager or the technician. It was Agent Malik. They're moving now, she said. We're watching traffic. Stay on the call and don't say anything about law enforcement. We just need active use on the target channels. My mouth went dry. The technician on the other end asked for a confirmation code, and I obediently read one aloud. I let him believe the ritual was going forward. I kept my voice quivering, kept my hands slow, kept performance perfect. Minutes later, what feels now like a cinematic exhale, I heard the distant, surreal sound of police sirens on the other end. Not my street, but a different cadence. An overseas broadcast in the background, then a muffled shout, then shouting of instructions in another language. The manager's voice went flat as paper. He hit an edge of panic I'd never heard before. No, no, disconnect. He hung up. For a second, I sat frozen. My heart felt like somebody had opened a window inside my chest. Then Agent Malik called back, her voice full of contained triumph. We have confirmation of a raid. Local partners report multiple arrests and a controlled sweep of the address you provided. We're getting more details now. Relief hit me like rain. It was dizzying and immediate, followed by a pressure behind my eyes. I laughed, and it sounded raw and small. Someone had done the heavy, dangerous legwork in a place I'd never seen. And because of our recordings, they'd gone in. But the day after that relief came a tangle of complications. The early press reports were patchy. Some local sites ran a story about a fraud ring disrupted. Others reported sweeping raids at call centers. The FBI sent me a cautionary email. Don't post about it publicly yet. Let them process evidence and notify victims. I read the email like a scripture and obeyed. A week later, Agent Malik called again. We've had several detentions and several people are in custody. But it's a complex operation. They use layers, temporary staff, remote managers, contractors. Some key figures were arrested. Others may have already left the building. Her voice had the tired inflection of someone who knows justice is rarely clean-cut. We also froze several accounts. Some funds have been recovered, not everything. But the accounts tied to your case have been flagged and an attempt is being made to return what is traceable. I remember walking to the bank that day, like someone going to claim an inheritance that felt undeserved. The teller looked like she did for everyone. Neutral, malfunctioning kindness. I handed her the official communication I'd received, Agent Malik's contact and the case number, and watched her check the system. It took longer than I expected. The woman disappeared to the back. When she came back, I saw a small bureaucratic smile. There is a pending trace, she said. It may take time. That phrase, pending trace, felt like both promise and tease, while the legal machinery cranked forward. The personal vendetta gnawed at me. I wanted more than an administrative return. I wanted to see the faces of the people who'd tried to steal my life's small comforts. I wanted the manager, the one who laughed about Rada Plaza, to be held in a room and told what real consequences look like. I wanted the technician who barked orders to feel the weight of the phones slamming on a table in a precinct far away. So I did what I had already been doing. I kept them talking. Days after the raid, an old number started calling me again. It was brazen, like a bruised animal testing the ground. They must have thought their operation was only partially compromised, or perhaps these were secondary teams trying to triage victims and salvage some work. The voice on the other end this time was rawer, angrier. "Who told you to call the police?" he spat. "Who told you to play us?" I kept my voice low, measured. "I reported it," I said. "I don't want trouble for anyone here. I just want my money back." He screamed then, a pressure so hateful it collided with the receiver. "You have no idea what you have done. You have no idea what you have started. If you like this, enjoy it. We have many more numbers. You think this is a win?" Something in him broke with that sentence. The bravado was a paper shield, thin and terrible. He was furious, unmoored, and below his fury was a fear I could hear in the tremor of his voice. And here's the part that made me feel like some strange, reluctant avenger. I realized this tiny act of exposure had punched holes into an entire ecosystem. People who used to dial numbers and feel invincible in the practice of small cruelties were now flinching at the possibility of consequences. I had not just protected myself, I had helped tilt a scale. A few days later, the bank called me. "We're initiating a provisional refund processing," the representative said. "It will take several business days, but we've marked the funds for your case. The law enforcement request is formal, and we're following it." I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. But the story wasn't over. Agent Malik had more news. "We have several of their supervisors in custody," she said. "We are working with local prosecutors on charges. The operation continues. Some actors are mobile, others are satellites. We also have leads that suggest the ring uses shell accounts in multiple jurisdictions." There it was again. Justice had been served, but it was jagged and incomplete. Then came a twist I hadn't expected. And this is where the story bends from neat closure into something messier. 2 weeks after the raids, I received an email from someone claiming to be one of the arrested. The message was short, written in clumsy English, and it struck a chord of complicated anger in me. "You think you won," it read, "but you have no idea how many families here rely on this work. You ruined people's lives too. You must live with that." The email ended with no threats, just bitter reproach. My hands clenched so hard my nails hurt. There was a raw moral tangle there I hadn't expected. These scammers were thieves, predators, and manipulators. But they were also human beings living in broken systems, some coerced, some desperate, and some cruel by choice. The simplistic revenge fantasy began to look frayed at the edges. I took that email to Agent Malik. She did not condone the scams, but she listened without immediate judgment. "We treat this as criminal behavior, not as a social problem to be solved with a single arrest," she said. "Understanding the structure helps us target the organizers, those who profit most." Her voice was even. "We want to cut off the head, not pinch the tail." It was both the coldness and the clarity of law enforcement. Their goal was systemic dismantling, not moral sermonizing. In the end, the money was not all recovered. Some funds were swept into accounts that had already been drained or had been moved through mixers. But an amount linked to my false refund was placed in a frozen asset account. Agent Malik said they'd try to process it back to me, legally and transparently, once the documentation cleared. I kept thinking about nights I spent listening to men in a room, the manager laughing, the technician barking, the supervisor ordering. I thought about the victims whose calls I hadn't known, the grandparents, the single moms, the small business owners. The raid was a win in a landscape of constant loss, but it also felt like a bandage on a wound. On a quiet evening, a week after the first arrests, something else happened. A voicemail landed in my inbox. This one was different, calmer, almost resigned. The voice said, "You will see money returned, but know this, we will adapt. We always adapt." It wasn't a threat exactly. It was a statement of inevitability. I sat with that for a long time. The reality was stark. The operation we'd hit might crumble, but others would rise in its place unless the systemic levers were pulled. Enforcement, prosecution, global cooperation. These were the tools that would make any difference. Still, as dully satisfying as the legal progress was, there was another kind of satisfaction that hit me months later when a formal letter arrived from a government office confirming a partial restitution. Seeing the line item, an amount tied to the case number, appeared more cathartic than I expected. It wasn't just about the money. It was the message. You were seen. You were heard. Someone did the work to make that right. So what did revenge look like in the end? It looked like paperwork and federal channels and tired agents doing their jobs. It looked like jail cells and seizure notices. It looked like a small, formal email saying the bank had marked funds for return. It was bureaucratic and therefore, strangely, more permanent. But there was also another layer to the revenge. The conversations I had after. People started messaging me, not just friends, but strangers, saying, "Thank you for what you did. Your call helped us." A woman I didn't know wrote, "My father would have lost everything. You gave us a chance." Those messages were like small, raw trophies. They mattered more than the numbers on a bank statement. As Chapter 5 closes, I'm standing on the edge of a sliver of closure. The predators had been punched. Some were jailed, some funds were frozen, some accounts were traced. But the ring was not entirely dismantled. There were still questions to be answered and people to protect. And there was one final twist left. Something that would make me look at the whole story in a new light. Something that would force me to question how far revenge should go and what justice really means. That twist is what I'll tell you about next. The envelope sat on my desk for 3 days before I opened it. Plain, government issue, nothing to distinguish it except the seal in the corner. It was addressed to me by name, with the FBI case number printed neatly above the return address. Inside was confirmation, a formal notice that restitution had been processed. Not the full $5,000, but $3,000 and some change. It had cleared through the frozen account and been officially credited back to my name. It wasn't everything, but it was real. My money, back where it belonged. For a moment, I thought that was it. End of story. Scammers arrested, restitution made, lesson learned. But the world doesn't tie itself neatly into bows. Because that same week, I got a message that spun my head sideways. It came in the form of a WhatsApp voice note from an unknown number with a foreign code. At first, I thought it was spam. But when I pressed play, I recognized the voice instantly. It was him, the manager. His tone was different now, stripped of the arrogance, the rehearsed lines, the smug manipulation. He sounded tired, almost broken. His words were halting, but I caught every one. They took everything. I don't know if you understand what you did. We are finished here. I lost people. My brother was in this too. We did this because there was nothing else. You got your money back. Congratulations, but you destroyed lives too. Families will not eat. Children will not go to school. Maybe you are proud. Maybe you think you are a hero. But you should know, revenge has a cost. I replayed it a dozen times. My pulse was a hammer in my ears. This was the twist no one tells you about in revenge stories. The moment when the villain doesn't threaten, doesn't rage, but humanizes themselves in a way that complicates the narrative. And I hated it. Because part of me wanted to laugh at him, to tell him that his families had eaten well off the savings of widows, that his children's schools had been paid with stolen pensions and emergency funds wired in panic by people who could barely afford to live. But another part of me, the part I didn't want to admit out loud, wondered about the truth in his words. Were there really kids caught in the fallout? Were there really people working in that office who were there not by greed, but by survival? I sat in that gray space for days, teetering between satisfaction and unease. That's when Agent Malik called me again. "We've had more developments," she said. "Some of the arrested have been released on bond, but we've confirmed the higher-level supervisors will be prosecuted. The operation has been weakened significantly." She paused, then added in a voice that carried weight, "Your testimony may be requested. You should prepare for that possibility." And there it was. My revenge wasn't just personal anymore. It was now part of an official record, a legal fight that would ripple beyond me. I told her about the message. She asked me to forward it. When she heard it, her reaction was clinical. "This is manipulation. They are attempting to guilt you into disengaging. Don't let it sway you. They thrive on sympathy just as they thrive on fear." Her words steadied me, because she was right. This wasn't remorse. It wasn't confession. It was another tactic, another attempt to keep me quiet, to keep me from pushing forward, to make me hesitate. That night, I recorded my own message, not to send back, but to keep for myself, to mark the moment. I said, "You preyed on the vulnerable. You laughed when you stole. You made fear your business model. And now fear has come back to you. You don't get to rewrite this as my crime. This was your choice, and choices have consequences." It felt final. It felt like closure. Weeks later, the restitution money officially landed in my account. I stared at the balance, watching the numbers glow on the screen. The same screen where I had once seen my life draining away. Only this time, the numbers meant victory. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the others, the countless victims who never got their money back, who never even knew how to report it. My small act, my recordings, my persistence, it had cut into the machinery of a scam that fed on the helpless. That was revenge. Not the Hollywood kind, not the violent fantasy, but the kind that makes predators look over their shoulders and realize they are no longer invincible. And the final irony: weeks after the case made its quiet rounds in the press, I started getting messages from strangers, survivors of scams, people who had lost everything, people who had nearly given up. They said things like, "I wish I had done what you did. Your story gave me courage. Because of you, I recorded my scammer, and now the police are looking into it." That was when I knew. My revenge hadn't just been personal, it had become contagious. The scammers had turned me into prey. But in the end, I had flipped the script. I had hunted them back, exposed them, and made sure their names didn't vanish into the void. So when people ask me if it was worth it, the fear, the nights of recording, the uncertainty, my answer is simple: yes. Because justice doesn't always come with explosions or dramatic finales. Sometimes it comes in the form of a balance restored, a voice note silenced, a call center dismantled. Sometimes revenge is quiet, but when it lands like a hammer. And in Edison, New Jersey, I sat at my desk with my money back, my evidence filed, and my heart steadier than it had been in months. That was the day I stopped being a victim. That was the day the predator became the prey.